Hello, I'm Alexis O'Brien, a clinical research facilitator with the University at Buffalo's Clinical and Translational Science Institute. Welcome to this clinical research education module, Pre-Review by Clinical Research Facilitators. If you have submitted research for IRB approval through CLIC, you are likely familiar with the timeline shown here. I'll provide information about the work that clinical research facilitators do during this step in the human subjects research approval process at UB. In this session, I'll discuss why clinical research facilitators complete pre-reviews for the Internal Review Board and when the pre-reviews take place. I will also discuss the process of pre-review and expected timeline for completion. The primary reason that clinical research facilitators complete pre-reviews on human subjects research studies that have been submitted to the UB IRB is to prevent delays in IRB review. Delays are prevented by preemptively addressing questions so that the IRB or IRB administrator is provided a clear picture of the proposed research. During pre-review of the protocol, the clinical research facilitator also indicates any documents that are missing from the submission and compares documents to make sure that study procedures are listed consistently between all documents. This list includes some of the most frequent clarifications requested during pre-review. If vague methods for protecting participant safety or privacy are included, clinical research facilitators will request more detailed procedures. While describing privacy protections, many researchers describe them interchangeably with confidentiality protections. The IRB requires that researchers recognize that these protections are distinct. Privacy applies to people, confidentiality applies to data. As such, they require different methods for protection and should be discussed separately. Protocols should provide detailed descriptions of study procedures. The goal is to describe the study in such a way that another researcher could read the protocol and replicate your study. A key part of human research is informed consent, so it is important to keep your intended audience in mind when writing study materials. We commonly find that forward-facing recruitment and consent documents, materials intended for potential participants, are written using terminology that would be unfamiliar to that audience. While research staff can answer questions about recruitment and consent documents, the goal is to create documents that are comprehensible to any potential participant. By making sure these materials are understandable, the researcher ensures that study participants are truly informed when they consent to participation. While the regulations from the U.S. Office for Human Research Protections state that these materials should be presented in language understandable to the people being asked to participate, the UB IRB provides the more specific guidance that an 8th grade reading level be used when describing what a study requires. I mentioned that it is important to include detailed descriptions of study procedures. This helps the IRB to identify what documents are needed. These are some documents that are commonly missing from CLIC submissions. Any studies that involve accessing medical records prior to informed consent require a Hipaa waiver. If the medical records are accessed for recruitment only, a partial Hipaa waiver is needed. If medical records will be collected as data from individuals who do not provide Hipaa authorization, a full Hipaa waiver would be used. The IRB also requires that any master lists or code keys and coded dataset files are included in the CLIC submission. They will verify that no data is included in the master list and no identifiers are housed in the dataset. Most CLIC submissions include copies of survey documents and consent documents. However, if any documents will be made available to participants in REDCap, a PDF from REDCap of the documents hosted there must be included in the IRB submission. Most researchers include assent documents when children will be involved in research, but there are two possible assent forms that may need to be attached. If the study includes any children between the ages of 7 and 13, the HRP 502A should be included. If participants are aged 14 to 17, the HRP 502 adult consent will be used as an assent document, but edited to remove any legal language, compensation language that is not appropriate for the child, and the Hipaa authorization section. The clinical research facilitator will also make sure that any documents that are listed in the protocol are attached to the CLIC submission. It is helpful to use the same document names as the attachments in CLIC and to describe them in the protocol. Pre-review identifies contradictions between documents. The consent and protocol go hand in hand, with the consent mirroring some sections of the protocol. For instance, if the consent indicates that a study session lasts 2 hours, but the protocol states that the study lasts 90 minutes to 3 hours, the documents must be edited to match. Researchers should pay attention to make sure that risks and benefits listed in the consent and protocol match. Also, if data or specimens will be banked for future research, participants should be made aware. Rules and requirements for participants are often described in the protocol, but omitted from the consent. If the protocol indicates procedures that require participants to do something, it is often necessary to describe it. For instance, if a participant must do something from home before or during participation in the study, like refrain from eating, sleeping, drinking, exercising, etc., they should be informed as part of the consent process. If the study requires them to perform any tasks outside of session, that commitment should be described as well. Once the research team has assembled the CLIC submission, the principal investigator, or their PI proxy, will submit it for IRB review. At this point, an IRB intake or meeting coordinator will send full board studies and expedited studies with participant interaction to a CTSI clinical research facilitator to pre-review. The pre-review must be completed before the study can move on to IRB review. The clinical research facilitator normally completes pre-reviews and requests any necessary edits within 2 days, dependent on the complexity of the submission. As previously mentioned, the clinical research facilitator reviews the submission to obtain clarifications, identify and request missing documents, and make sure that the information contained within all submitted documents is consistent and correct. They do this by editing documents, using tracked changes, and listing comments and questions in the margins. Once all materials have been reviewed, the clinical research facilitator emails a zip file containing any documents that need edits to the principal investigator, PI proxy, and primary contact. The IRB intake or meeting coordinator will put the study into clarifications requested so that the click submission can be edited. The research team is encouraged to reach out to the clinical research facilitator if they have any questions about requested edits. The research team should email or call the clinical research facilitator directly. While clinical research facilitators can leave comments on Click, they do not receive notification about comments made through the Click system. The IRB asks that study teams try to complete edits within 2 weeks of receipt. Once pre-review edits have been made, the research team should attach the edited documents to Click. During pre-review, submitted documents are still considered new, and clean copies should be submitted for IRB review. They can then select the Submit Response button, which will move the study out of clarifications requested and back into pre-review. After you've submitted your edits, the clinical research facilitator will verify that all requested edits are completed, usually the same day that you submit the edits. Even if all edits are completed, your responses may require additional edits. For instance, if you did not include a recruitment plan in your original submission, but your edits indicate that you will use electronic medical records to identify potential participants, the clinical research facilitator will request a partial Hipaa waiver if one is not included. Once all requested edits have been completed, the clinical research facilitator will notify the IRB intake or meeting coordinator that the study has been pre-reviewed and is ready for IRB review. At this point, the clinical research facilitator is no longer involved with reviewing the study, and it will move on to either full IRB review or expedited review by an IRB administrator. I hope that you have gained a better understanding of the purpose and process of pre-review by clinical research facilitators through this presentation. We encourage you to keep this process and the common pitfalls mentioned in this module in mind when you put together any future IRB submissions. Please reach out to the CTSI clinical research facilitators by emailing ctsihelp@buffalo.edu or calling 716-829-4357 if you have any questions. Thank you.